Hello, all you retirement researchers. Welcome to Retire with Style. I'm Alex, and I'm here with my trusted companion. Many people refer to him as my sidekick, right, Wade? Wade Fowl.
That's the right direction there. Hey, everyone.
And Rob Cordeau, McLean's Rob Cordeau. Hey,
Hey,
Rob, welcome back, man.
it's good to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. And today we want to continue our Q&A. As you know, every once in a while, I think we're going to be doing this with increasing frequency because, they kind of give us great content and it's very salient to the moment. We did a live YouTube Q&A and we just couldn't, after 2 hours, we still had many questions to answer and we couldn't get through them all. So in our Retire with Style tradition, we've selected the remaining ones and we're going to knock them out in this episode, right, Wade?
That's right. But first, Alex, for those watching on YouTube, I think we should discuss your sartorial choices with your velvety, pinstriped, prison chic pajama look. Is that?
Thank you. The sartorialist. The sartorialist. Well, Wade, there is some. Don't poo-poo the velour. it's
velour. That's an old
yeah,
Seinfeld.
yeah. It's a little past spring, so it's a little warm for this, but I haven't cleaned out my closet yet. And it was hanging on the bed as I was making that transition. And I said, you know what? I'm going to put this bad boy on today. But
Kinda
you're
looks
right.
Like you've got the puffy shoulders. Puffy shoulders, too?
No, that's just my delts from working out, man. All those pull-ups that you're not doing and I am. So maybe in 2 years you can wear this bad boy. But until now, just admire. Just admire, man.
Kind of looks like the Habsburg style clothes from the
golden
age of the European monarchies.
Well, it's a nod to my Spanish ancestry, I guess. The Habsburgs. Wow, look at that. Pretty good. Hey, by the way, you know what's a great show?
Cartoons.
You know what's a great show? I'm in love with it. The Great on Hulu. Have you guys heard of it? The Great?
No, I haven't seen it. Nope.
They're talking about Catherine the Great from Russia. It's hilarious. It's done as a not a spoof, but it's one of those that it's hilarious. I mean, it's good. For my money, it's one of the best shows out there right now. So check it out for all you listeners. The Great.
How did they treat the whole horse thing, or is that?
Well, no. They take it head on. But it's kind of a joke. The way it came out. In the show, the way they do it is that she was very forward thinking, right? And Peter the Great's son, I forget his name on that show, great actor. He's kind of seen as just a tool, really. And she convinces him to kind of like, hey, look, let's embrace free speech, that kind of thing. And so they bring in a printing press into Russia, and the court folks start having fun with the printing press. And like in a veritable meme fashion, they create images of her and the equine stable in Russia, not very favorable, and they pass them all over the place. And before you know it, the rumor becomes effectively a perceived reality. But she like takes it on and laughs at it in the show. I mean, I have no idea what happened in real life in that regard. But funny, of all the things, that's what you bring up, Wade.
Yeah, that's what I know about
Very
Catherine
interesting, Wade. What goes inside your head? What prurient fantasies you think about?
And that's part of the fake history of strong women getting these kinds of slanders throughout history, I think.
Wow. Rob, did you see how Wade turned that around and made it into a powerful message for the female audience?
Yes, impressive.
That's right.
Right, very impressive. Wow. Disabusing everyone of this falsehood. Very nice, Wade. Very nice.
Right. Yeah, we're all about accuracy here at Retire with Style.
Yes, we dabble in precision, Rob. We dabble in precision. And Wade knows where that's from.
And that is why we brought Rob in today, because some of these questions require even more precision than Alex and I could handle. So thank you, Rob, for joining us today.
Oh, good to be here.
With that being said, maybe we should start diving into questions.
All right, let's do it.
So the first one is the longest.
I'll be the
reader.
reader.
You want to read it?
In this episode. I'll
Get
be
ready
the
for an
reader.
essay.
Yeah, I'll be the reader. All right. Hello, Alex. I love your show.
And your shirt.
Hello, Wade and Alex. Love your show. I'm planning for retirement in a year. Asset allocation is an area that I need help. My RISA style is total return. Currently, 50% of my taxable account is vested in RSUs, restricted stock units. And
Is invested RSUs.
yeah, sorry, restricted stock. Well, and in parentheses, yes, tech. So I assume in a technology stock, which are highly appreciated. 40% in the Vanguard 500 and growth indices, 10% in T-bills. So 50% in RSUs, 40 in the Vanguard 500 and growth indices, and 10% in T-bills. I'd like to manage sequencing risk by implementing the rising equity glide path approach. However, being in high being in a high income bracket has made selling RSUs very costly. Since the fixed income portion can cover 2 to 3 years of expenses, is it recommended that I sell my RSUs and move into the desired asset allocation before I retire, or can I wait until retirement when my income bracket is much lower? I don't expect to tap into my retirement accounts for the next 12 years. Thank you. Last name. Silence now. That's my teleprompter Biden impersonation. Without being political, it's just funny. Humor is humor. All right, what do you folks think here?
You know,
Yes.
the
So,
first,
no, go for it. I was just going to say Rob is our resident expert on RSUs. So really, that's a
well,
great
yeah,
opportunity to.
I mean, I think the first thing that jumps out at me is I don't know if it's a he or a she, I didn't catch that. But they would like to be in a rising equity glide path, but they're already at 90% equities, right? So right off the bat, we have a problem, and they recognize that. I think it comes down to whether this person wants to embrace that risk. They mentioned the sequence of returns risk, wanting to be in this glide path. You can avoid the capital gains, you can avoid the income tax by holding on to your stocks, or you can sell those and mitigate your concentration risk and your equity risk. So I think that's kind of the first question: is which of those is more important? And that's a really important question. Sometimes we want to let the tax tail wag the investment dog? Is 90% equities really worth it going into retirement to avoid a slightly higher tax at that point?
Rob, but one thing he stated there, and we kind of briefly spoke about it for like 10 seconds beforehand, is I'm under the impression, and I could be wrong, but my spider senses tell me, because he's talking about his income tax bracket, that he may be under the impression that RSUs are taxed at an income rate. But in fact, do you want to do the big
Yeah,
reveal?
it is a little confusing on RSUs. So, and I've had clients tell me I have RSUs, and what they really have is the shares that they've received from RSUs or ISOs or ESPP. So sometimes they have those shares
And these are
sitting
all
in a brokerage
incentive.
account.
Just because we threw out a lot of acronyms, do you want to maybe just
Yeah,
ISOs?
yeah,
That kind of thing?
like an ISO is an incentive stock option plan. RSUs are restricted stock units. So they're all just forms of executive compensation that companies come out with and give to executives. But I think it's important to find out what the status is, because we've met with clients who say, well, I have all these RSUs. And then we look at it, and it's actually a brokerage account of shares that used to be RSUs and that used to be stock options, or used to be in an ESPP, an employee stock purchase plan. So if they are stocks that are free and clear for them to sell, we might just be looking at capital gains. That's a very different situation than someone executing RSUs and having to pay ordinary income tax. So that's kind of an important distinction. If it's just capital gains, there's not much of a difference. A high income earner might be paying 5% more in cap gains than a typical retiree. You're looking at 20% versus 15. So I don't know that that would hold me back from selling if I was 90% equities, really looking to retire soon and wanting to cut back on my equities. If it really is RSUs that are going to be taxed as ordinary income, then I'd start looking at the current bracket versus the expected bracket in retirement and find out what sort of delta are we really looking at. But it's that question is an important one. If they don't mind the risk, or if they can afford the risk, then maybe waiting a little while until they retire and their income drops off, then implementing the rising equity glide path could be an approach.
Yeah,
But
because
that comes with a lot of risk.
wait.
Well, yeah, Rob. So like if the RSUs are treated as capital gains, it's kind of like if you sold everything all at once, a lot of that would probably be taxed at the 23.8% with the 20. Well, we're not sure how much money we're talking about, but once you're above around that $600,000 range, 20% capital gains tax, and then the 3.8% net investment income tax. And yeah, they're probably never really in a situation where if they kind of took the next 20 years to spread this out, not much of it at the income levels this person's probably at is going to come out at less than the 15%. And even then, a lot of it may come out at 18.8% with the net investment income tax. So with that sort of difference not necessarily being so great, that might speak to going ahead to accelerate more to getting a more diversified position and getting to that lower stock allocation that they're looking for to set up for the rising equity glide path. That's kind of the point there. But if it were ordinary income, then there is a lot more to think about with maybe they're in the 37% bracket now in retirement, and with the current law projected to increase the tax rates in 2026, maybe they're thinking about a 25% bracket or something in that ballpark. Of course, we never know what sort of changes will be done to taxes as well, where maybe capital gains taxes could have higher rates in the future. But you're kind of leaning in the direction that maybe working towards that diversification now might be worth the tax hit. Are there any other strategies to consider too, where they might hold that position but still be able to offset potential risks?
I was thinking of a few, but one of the things that I'm not 100% clear on is the statement, since the fixed income portion can cover 2 to 3 years of expenses. To me, that means, so he's planning on drawing just a fixed income, which if he's already at a 90-10 split, he's going to be 100% equity. The rising equity glide path over 5 years is going to mean that he's going to be taking on leverage to get even more equity exposure. So he's got a significant issue, right? He or she has a significant issue right there. And I was thinking about our comments about long-term care, where you said, insurance is really about low probability events that are high cost, right? To some extent, he's dealing with something like this in terms of, if you have a drawdown of 40%, and where are you, right? From an equity standpoint, and we've seen this, and you have to start thinking in terms of, it's like that book, Thinking in Bets, in terms of the right decisions don't necessarily turn out positive all the time, because life is there's certain aspects of life that are just out of your control. But if you're very methodical and thoughtful about making every single decision accordingly based on best practices, then on net in life you should do better, right? That kind of thing, right? And so here's one of those things that you can put your head in the sand and just hope for the best, and S&P goes up, the next 5 years, and you're a genius. Or you do the opposite, and all of a sudden you think you're stupid, but you're not. You did the right thing from a prudent standpoint, right? Let me leave it at that. There's that rigmarole that this person has to decide. That's not something we can answer for him. It's up to that person. But I think if you take a step back and think, what can I control to mitigate the risk? since you're ending your life in terms of the human capital portion of it, all you have are your investments, right? That kind of thing. And don't lose sight of that. The other piece I would say is, let's assume, I'm going to answer this like if it's a capital gains issue. Well, and I'm going to also assume another simplifying assumption is, you have other assets available that you can turn around and do other things with. And so if you have a Vanguard 500 and you have growth indices, I'm going to assume you're a passive investor. And so what you can do is set up a direct indexing strategy around that. If you can somehow sell those funds, and maybe there's somewhat of a gain, but not that much, etc. Or you have a vintage of assets that you can apply to it, a new vintage of assets you can apply to it. And let's just say, for argument's sake, those RSUs are worth $100,000. Again, argument's sake, and you have another $900,000 available. That kind of thing. What I would do is set up a direct indexing approach where you're mimicking or you're tracking effectively a large market index, and that RSU is representative of the index, of the industry within that index. So let's say if this was Merck, right? You have Merck stock, right? What I would do is create a complementary market portfolio around that with individual stocks, keep the Merck, and then as you have individual losses in those other stocks, which you will if you're tracking the entire market, you turn around and sell those, and you buy effectively similar stocks that still maintain the tracking position of that market portfolio. And what you'll find is over time, you're going to have losses that then you can apply to these capital gains, to the capital gains when you eventually sell the RSU stock, and give yourself 3 to 4 years to do that. Because in any direct indexing strategy, the reality is that you're going to maximize all of the losses that you could potentially get without any new vintages in about 5 to 7 years. Then it kind of just baselines. Why? Because all stocks over time kind of go up. That's the way that I would do it. I would have that RSU in a direct indexing strategy, and that RSU pretty much represents the industry that it's in, and then complement it by buying a representative sample of stocks in the other indices that gives you a tracking error of, let's say, less than 3%. All right. Tracking error means how will you perform relative to the index. And that's an error term. So over time, that should net out at zero. And so after 5 years, you should have nice passive losses available that you could be using to offset that RSU. And voila, there you go. I explained that on the fly, a complicated strategy like that. But Rob, Wade, did that make sense as I was explaining it?
It does. I think it's possible, the way they worded the question, it's possible that these have not been paid out yet, and therefore they've not been taxed for ordinary income tax yet. So, and the fact that they mention income tax bracket makes me think that might be the case. So they might be talking just ordinary income tax. If that's the case, again, I think it comes back to the risk. We're talking 50% of that person's portfolio is in one position. I'm assuming RSU plural, but I'm assuming it's one position. That's a lot of risk. So that's the question that I would ask is, do you really want to go into retirement with 50% of your portfolio in one position?
Then another way to frame that is, but if you framed it like this, does it sound more appealing? Because he's framing it, not him, but most people frame it as, I'm going to take a tax hit if I sell this. I don't want to sell this. But if all of a sudden someone told you 15 years ago, I'm going to give you these RSUs, I'm going to give you income, I'm going to give you taxable income for the next 15 years, that it's going to equate to 90%, not 90%, that's going to equate to 50% of your portfolio, which let's just say it's $5 million, so it's $2.5 million. I'm going to pay you out $2.5 million over the next 15 years. And I'm not even going to tax you. It's going to be tax deferred for 15 years. But in 15 years, I want to get taxes on that. How many people wouldn't say, yeah, fine, of course, right?
True. Yep.
A lot of folks will say, yeah, where do I sign?
Right. But when the IRS comes knocking, people don't like to get out their checkbook.
But you follow what I'm saying. It could be it's a framing issue, because effectively pat yourself on the back. You did great for 15 years, and you were given effectively a tax loan, a tax liability loan. Not too dissimilar from an IRA, if you will.
Yeah. And, I've watched it. I think what colors my viewpoint of this is I've watched it happen with clients and
Exactly.
prospects. I had someone I knew back in the 90s who went to work for a tech company, received some stock options as a signing bonus. And it was tiny. It was like $10,000 as a sign-on bonus. That 10,000 grew to $1.6 million in 5 years. Insane growth. And he wasn't a client of mine, just a friend. He was telling me about it, and I was telling him how he really needs to diversify. And I was telling him that when it was 800,000, and then he came back to me a few months later. It's $1 million. He said, "Boy, Rob, I'm so glad I didn't listen to you." And it went to 1.6 million. Eventually, it collapsed, and it's worthless. And his strategy was, I'm only going to pull out 250,000 a year. I'm going to take myself up to what was then a break point for a tax bracket. So he let the tax tail wag the investment dog. He got to pull out one withdrawal of 250, and then he lost all the rest. So he was so concerned about paying that tax that out of $1.6 million investment, he only got 250 out of it. So it was a good lesson for me. And there's other stories I've seen like that, where with the best intentions, being concentrated in individual stock, and it takes a lot of risk.
I'll say this, another thing, and Wade, I want you to chime in here. There's a little bit of a dissonance in how this person is thinking about it. And what I want to point out is there's reservation in selling the RSUs, right? Simply because, look, this thing can maintain. It can go up. I don't want to sell it right now. It's not going to go down, if you will. Because if he knew it would go down, he'd sell it, right? But interestingly enough, he's worried about sequence risk, which sequence risk is two-sided, right? There's an upside to sequence risk, which can be great. And there's a downside to sequence risk, which is I have to put in a rising equity glide path. You see what I'm getting at, Wade? Like he's trying to put together a square peg in a round hole in some overarching manner, in the sense of he's trying to be on the conservative side for sequence risk, but for the RSU, which is, I think, significantly more risky than sequence risk, because there's no diversification from unsystematic risk there. He's willing to roll the dice.
Yeah. And we don't know the history of how these perform. But Rob, like in the case of your friend that you were describing, part of it might have been not wanting to pay taxes, but with that sort of meteoric rise, probably part of it was thinking it would go up forever. And that's where you're taking that concentration risk.
That was part of it, right? So, but you bring up a good point, Alex. The idiosyncratic risk of having 50% of your portfolio in one stock far exceeds the sequence risk, right? And there's just no comparison. So I guess that's kind of the issue I have is, yes, I can see why they want to address sequence of returns risk. I think that's a brilliant idea. The more pressing issue is the concentration.
Yeah. So said another way, I would rather diversify RSU than worry about implementing a sequence risk strategy. If gun to my head, that's the one I'm addressing first. I don't even care about sequence risk if I can't address the RSU. It's like there's a fire in the kitchen. I'm not going to be worried about the sheets in the bedroom.
True. And we haven't talked about the dollar amount, but if this was someone with a $10 million portfolio, $5 million in RSUs, they might be able to survive just fine with $5 million in other stocks and bonds and have a very healthy, happy retirement. Maybe they can afford the risk. But if you're talking about someone with only 2 million and $1 million is in RSUs, that creates a much different retirement, 1 million versus 2 million, right? So the dollar amount might shed some light on their risk capacity.
Do you know how much velour shirts cost, Rob?
No,
in
I
this
don't.
in this economy.
Will.
It looks expensive to me.
It's criminal. It's criminal.
Yeah.
No, Wade. Any other things to point out in this
No, I
question?
think we got this question. It's almost like a whole episode on one question, but
Well,
we do have more.
well, I mean, don't forget the last sentence is, I don't expect to tap into my retirement accounts for the next 12 years.
Yeah, so there's an
we're talking
element
about a
there.
big number. You know?
Yeah, we just don't have complete information with this question about how far are they from retirement.
But
and
you've given
everything
them
else.
decision points. You've given decision points, which is what him and or her and everyone else should be thinking about.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Next question. I
Okay.
wish I had discovered how important and interesting planning for retirement is about 5 years earlier. But I'm now a devoted fan of your guide, Wade and Alex, and your podcast now. I read that terribly. Let me do it with a little feeling.
You'd be a little more monotone.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, what the hell? You know what? My confidence is shot. Wade, can you do this one?
All right, I'll read.
That was
this
terrible.
I'm happy to be a reader too, since you guys are better.
Halfway through, you realize you're doing a terrible job, and you're like, "Oh my god, how do I get out of this?"
Wade and Alex, I wish I had discovered how. Wade and Alex, I wish I had discovered how important and interesting planning for retirement is about 5 years earlier, but now I'm a devoted fan to your guidebook, Wade, and Alex, and your podcast now. My RISA profile places me in the upper right quadrant, total returns. No, they are upper right quadrant of safety first and optionality. That would be the upper left.
Yeah, that's
okay. I think for the rest of the, I think they're upper left. So time segmentation, safety first, and optionality. Although I might not be quite as safety oriented if I took the profile now after learning more from reading and listening to you. My question revolves around the time I retire, when to take Social Security. I'm 65 and plan to retire shortly after I turn 67 in early 2026. What strategies would you recommend to preserve as much principal in that three-year gap period? My wife and I have $1.3 million total in traditional IRAs and a regular joint brokerage account with $400,000, so $1.7 million total. We'll take my wife's Social Security when I retire. So we're getting some, she'll be 69. Okay, so he's 65, he'll retire at 67. She's 67, she'll be 69. She'll take Social Security, earning yearly $28,000. My Social Security will grow from $3,400 to $4,400 per month if I wait to 70. And I did that calculation with $4,400 a month, that's $52,800 a year. At age 70. Would a bond, MIGA, or CD ladder be appropriate, or something else to provide help to reduce using up my principal? So wanting to avoid losing principal. Our total essential expenses will be approximately $85,000 per year net of taxes. The end. We don't know what the discretionary
story.
Yeah. And so I think the question is really, there's a couple elements of, well, Social Security claiming decisions, and then how to build a Social Security bridge to try to get up to that $85,000, which is net of taxes. So taxes go on top of that, plus any discretionary spending too. Can that be done with some sort of, it sounds like wanting to do a laddered approach where you're only spending interest so that you can preserve the principal. But to be clear, if you did that too, it sounds like there's no sort of stock investing component. It's what I put in. You'd have to probably put close to $1.7 million into some sort of bond ladder to generate the type of interest you're looking for to fill that gap. And so thoughts on this scenario, gentlemen?
You know, one thing that jumps out at me is the Social Security claiming age, skipping the bridge discussion for a minute.
Yeah, we should start there.
They mentioned potentially wanting to start it at that age versus delaying till 70. It looks like quite a gap between the earnings history between the two. One of them's 52,000 a year. The other is 28,000 a year in terms of the benefit.
And
Whenever
that's a
we
little more
see
than
this,
half.
yeah, whenever we see that come up, it's an even greater incentive for the higher earner to wait until age 70, right? Because now the way Social Security works, whoever dies first, the surviving spouse gets the larger of the two benefits, right? So that means that if the higher earner waits till 70, even if they die early, that higher benefit's going to continue until the second passes away. So that's there's a lot of incentives for waiting until 70 to claim. But that's another one in their case that I can see based on the earnings history.
Yeah, he's the high earner. His wife is 2 years older, which offsets a little bit of the potential benefits. But yes, he's already saying to wait till 70. I think that part's probably pretty sound. I would really encourage them to make sure they've tested the strategy with Social Security claiming software, just because the wife may not need to wait till 69. That's something you'd really want to address with software. Once she reaches full retirement age and doesn't, so she's already 67, just there's not a, it's more flexible for the low earner in the couple in terms of when they claim, since that benefit is only around for one of their lifetimes. So the only thing the Social Security claiming software might suggest, I'm pretty sure it would tell him to claim at 70 as he plans to do, but it might recommend a different claiming age for the wife. She might not necessarily wait to 69.
Yep, it's possible. Good point.
Which would then lower the bridging amount.
Yep.
Well, no, the bridge, there's still going to be that 3-year bridge. By the time he's 67, her income would be on either way.
Oh, because he's the younger one.
Yeah, he's the younger one.
Yeah, he's the young one. Sorry, I was thinking of my traditionalist view of the world. All right. Well,
but yeah, if she waits till 69, she'll be getting 28,000. So there's still over 50, like $57,000 is the gap just for essential, and that's plus taxes. So going to be, I don't know what the taxes will be, but probably over $60,000 of a gap for those 3 years. When he does claim Social Security, it's going to fill a lot of that gap. They're not going to have a big distribution unless there's a big discretionary spending goal. They don't necessarily need a big distribution after age 70. So the other comment I had here was they may be too focused on preserving principal. It's okay to spend some of that down, given that you're not going to have a big spending need after age 70, a big distribution need after age 70.
I wasn't even thinking about the Social Security. I figured you guys would answer it, so I didn't even bother putting any mental calories there. A couple points from a bond ladder standpoint in this whole principal stuff. And Wade, you may want to talk about when you're creating bond ladders in your simulations. I want to make it clear to everyone, we're not Wade's analysis doesn't just take dividend only. Effectively, he's counting on the maturity of the bond and using those proceeds as well as part of the process. And you got to think, okay, let's say your investments are composed of 10 units, just for argument's sake, right? And 4 of those units are in bonds, right? And you want to leave 6 of those units untouched, if you will, in retirement. You want to let them grow or whatever. That's your more discretionary kind of thing. Well, if 2 of those units you use to create a bond ladder in which you're going to just deplete it, all in all, why not? Who cares? Because you've left the other pieces to grow unencumbered, right? And so hopefully that growth will make up the difference of using those 2 units completely. And that's effectively what a bond ladder is. And the fact that you're in that sort of time segmentation bucketing strategy, that's what you're counting on anyways. You're counting on actually, you have these cookie jars that you're going to use the assets for essential expenses for the time period that you have. And you're hoping that after that's done, you can replenish them with growth of the other assets. The benefit that this person has is that they're going to be able to do that from Social Security alone. So there's even a greater time horizon for the other assets to grow. So instead of quote unquote handicapping, let's say 8 of the units, because you don't want to go into principal on either one of those holdings, you've kind of stymied yourself a little bit in the growth of your overall portfolio. Wade, Rob?
Yeah. Just to clarify, for me, a retirement income bond ladder means you're spending the principal too. But what he's describing is living off the interest of a bond position to fill the gap. And yeah, that might impact the total returns just because, like I said, of course, we don't know the full math here, but there's $1.7 million. It's going to take an awful lot of that to generate enough interest without spending any principal to fill that income gap. And that means a high bond allocation that could sacrifice the potential total return of a more diversified portfolio that does allow for some spending of principal.
I think it's an inefficient use of assets, and I'm saying that with respect. I don't mean to like poke the bear or anything like that. It's just cold and calculating. That's not in essence an efficient use of assets.
Yeah, and I'm with Wade. I think it's going to require using up that principal during that period. And in fact, from a tax perspective, if they both stop working and there's a gap between when they stop and when Social Security starts, they might be in a very low bracket tax-wise. So it might make sense to be doing some IRA distributions during that period, which could help sort of move money from one side of the fence, the IRA side, which has tax liability connected to it, over to their bucket of non-qualified assets that they could pull from to handle their cash needs during these gap years.
100%. It didn't occur to me, the distribution part from the IRA.
I mean, sometimes we think about IRAs like, boy, I'm not going to touch that till I'm 73, till RMDs start. But sometimes it's actually advantageous to either pull it out, or in this case, if they have enough in the individual account or the joint account, they could push it into a Roth conversion with some of that income. So there's some tax planning that should be done annually every one of those years too.
And if you listen to our Medicare episode, you don't want any bombs coming from there either, if you do that during that time period. Wade, am I wrong?
Oh, you mean those IRMA surcharges?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're already both 65, so they also have to make those Medicare decisions if they're still working at a large employer with at least 20 actively employed, at least 20 employees. They may not be switching to Medicare yet. But yeah, absolutely, the health insurance piece is important here too.
Okay. Why don't we do this? Why don't we stop on this episode? We have a few more questions, but we're good. We're getting to that 40-minute witching hour time, and that just feels right for this podcast. So why don't we stop here and continue it on the flip side? Wade, any parting thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great idea. We only got through 2 questions, but there's a lot to talk about. And I think the questions we still have remaining are going to be similar in terms of having a lot of wide-ranging discussion. So probably those other 3 questions can be a whole episode in and of themselves.
All righty. Thanks, Rob, for jumping in on this. Really appreciate it, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been fun.
Right.
Yeah, thank you, Rob. Thanks, everyone. And we'll continue with the Q&A on the next Retire with Style.